Good morning. This is
Good
Kathy
morning.
Beatty with Hey Carrie. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Yeah, I am so excited to have you. And this is Kathy Beatty with Divorce Support Anonymous. And I'm going to interview today someone who could be your very best friend in a few moments as you go through the process of divorce. I've had Carrie on before, and she's a wealth of information. And she is Carri Goldring. She's a senior loan officer certified in divorce lending, specializing in working with family attorneys, divorce financial planners to navigate real estate, debt, income from divorce. So, Carrie, again, welcome and thank you.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here and to be helpful.
Thank you. And you're so much last time. So I need to check in with you periodically because there are so many changes, right, in the financial world.
There's always changes. That's the hard part, right?
Yes. So let's talk about the current market right now. And as we go through divorce, you may be searching for a new home. One of you is going to be searching for a new home. So the current market, I understand, is terrible, but let's hear it from an expert.
So the inventory is the quote unquote terrible part. So there's not that many people that have their homes up for sale, mainly because they feel like they don't have anywhere to go, or they refinanced when interest rates were really low. And if they don't have a substantial reason to move, a lot of people are choosing to stay put. We are starting to see a lot of new construction, which I think helps our market because it finally gives people places to go. But yeah, we're in kind of a tough spot because I'd say 3/4 of the homes out there have really, really low interest rates. And unless you're having babies, someone's passing away, you're going through a divorce, off to college, unless there's like some major family milestone, people just aren't moving right now.
Yeah. And so if they're forced to move, how do they begin finding a house and starting the loan process? They're going to have to refinance. Has anything changed as far as you have to have your divorce completed before you can actually prepare for a request a loan?
I don't need anyone's divorce to be final to do a mortgage. I know there's a lot of institutions out there that require that. At Union Home Mortgage, where I work, we do not require that the divorce be final. So if we need to use any terms from the divorce, like someone being awarded a home or someone being awarded a debt that wasn't in their name, then we need to have a signed settlement agreement or a judgment of divorce. But if none of those things come up and someone qualifies with the debt that shows up on their credit report and they have enough income to go buy a home and they don't need support payments or anything like that, then there's nothing stopping them from moving forward unless the attorney says there's a reason
Okay.
not to move forward. Because sometimes, someone purchases a home while they're still married and now that becomes a marital asset.
Right.
Sometimes that is, some attorneys will say, yep, we're good to go, don't worry. And others attorneys will say, don't do it until we're done.
Yeah. So a very important conversation to have with your attorney.
Right. And then, yeah, anyone who wants to talk to me about a mortgage at any time, I always say sooner the better, because then we can lay the foundation, right? So if you don't have credit in your name and you need credit, and we need to work on that. If you're an authorized user on accounts or you have joint accounts, do you close those now? Do you close them later? Do you get your name off now? Do you get your name off later? Different people have different answers depending on their situation. If someone needs support to qualify or you need to get rid of some debt, there could be a whole bunch of things that we could do ahead of time to get you ready. Do you need to be divorced? Do you not need to be divorced? Is there wording in your judgment that will help you go through mortgage approval? I've had people swap car loans to qualify. So there has never been two situations the same.
Mhm.
So the more information and the more educated you can get, the earlier the better, I say.
Mhm. So how do you, because I know I work with a lot of people who don't have good credit and don't have a lot of assets. So how do you begin to develop your credit? And unfortunately, I work with a lot of people who don't have the financial knowledge and background to be able to maneuver this. It's one more unknown, terrifying
I know.
area of divorce.
So true. And then you have two kinds. You have the person who well, maybe three kinds. You have the person who literally has no credit. So not necessarily bad credit, just no credit. That's a pretty easy encounter over a 6-month time period that you could build credit. And we could talk about, how to go about doing that. The main rule of thumb would be that you should have 3 lines of credit in your name for sure. One of them should be a revolving line of credit, and never to spend more than 29% of your credit limit. And obviously always be on time, right? And don't let anything go into collection. Then you have the person who has credit, but it's tied to somebody else. So you may be on someone else's credit cards or loans, and then you have this great credit because of them. But if you get removed from that credit, then all of a sudden you have nothing, or they start making late pays and then they start ruining the credit that you have. So that's a different scenario. And that I kind of like to look at line by line. What credit are you on? Are you authorized user? Are you joint? Like, what do we do with all these things? And we literally go through line by line on someone's credit. And then you have someone who has bad credit or not great credit, right? And then that takes an individual look too, because depending on, is it past foreclosures, bankruptcies, collections, just late pays, no revolving debt? Like there's so many things that could be there that we really have to look at everything on an individual line by line basis and get a sheet together of what to do. Or does someone have too much debt? Sometimes I put spreadsheets together for people that first we're going to pay this off, then we're going to pay a portion of this, then we're going to do that. And we go step by step by step. And then every couple of months I'll call and check in and make sure we're still on target, or do we need to create a new plan because the one we're doing wasn't working.
Mm. So when you start that process of developing their credit and they don't have any credit or they have poor credit, can they begin then? Will they have a knowledge of how much home that they can purchase? Or is
If
this
their credit is repaired, yeah, I mean, so how much home you can purchase, or really how much you can borrow, has to do with your income and your monthly obligations. So if we're going to do some credit repair and change those monthly obligations, then we can say, if this happens, then this takes place. If you don't do anything, then this is what happens. If you have no credit, then typically we just need to build some credit, and then how much debt are you going to build while you're building your credit? But we can always give ideas. Anytime you look at a home, the property taxes are going to change, the home insurance can change, the interest rates can change. So unfortunately, we don't ever get to be target perfect, but we can always talk about an idea and try to be a little more conservative so we have some wiggle room.
Mhm. Is there, yeah, the interest rate, and when you buy a home at a higher interest rate, but you also are going to get different taxes than you're used to, higher taxes, because you've just purchased this home. So how do you help people through all of that, all of those mathematical gymnastics?
Right, and it's mathematical gymnastics. So we do have a couple conversations, because you just have to have the idea in the back of your head, because we can't even guess what a tax assessor is going to do to a home after you purchase it. But main thing, remind everybody that when you own your home, there is a tax cap that you can put on one home that you own. They call that the homestead, which is typically the house that you live in, where the taxable value of that home cannot increase more than 5% a year. So the idea is, if your house grows in value, they're never going to put you in a situation where your taxes go so high that you can't afford the home you already live in. So there's a cap. But when you move to a new home, the cap that the seller had goes away, and the tax assessor is given one time to reassess that house at current value and assess new taxes before the cap goes back on again for you as the homeowner. So you could look at 4 houses up for sale on the same street, and one could have really low tax and one could have high tax. And the first thought is, oh, well, I like this house because the taxes are lower. But in all reality, the cap goes away on all homes, and you are going to be at the starting point similar no matter what you purchase. So we have people call the city tax assessor and just give them an address and say, can you go over with me if I purchase this house? What would the property taxes be? And they'll give you a really good idea. It won't be perfect, but you'll get an idea. If you have an escrow account set up, it usually takes 6 months to a year before all the taxes and everything catches up to you, where you get a letter in the mail saying, hey, your escrow account is short and you need to send money to your mortgage company. And we're also going to raise your mortgage payment. So it does take some time. If you pay taxes and insurance yourself, then whenever the bill comes, obviously the bill comes and you have to pay it. And there's 2 bills a year, a summer one that comes July 1st and a winter one that comes December 1st. And they're not 50-50 either. So depending on what city you live in, typically the summer one is higher, but not always the case. So we just have to talk and we just have to get prepared as much as we can. But unfortunately, we don't really have any solid answers, which makes this process really difficult.
I love that you stated that you could get the tax assessor to come over and give you an idea. I did not know that.
Oh
And
yeah, you could just call. They do it all day long.
yeah, and how helpful. I know my goal when I work with people, whether it's in mediation or coaching or whatever, is I don't want any surprises for them. And this is one way that you can have more knowledge and more preparation of, okay, I know ballpark pretty close to what I'm looking at.
Right. You can also, a lot of the cities have their own website, and you could usually Google millage, homestead millage rates for a particular city. And then it goes by school district. So let's say, you look up one city, but they have 5 different school districts in that city. And then you go look up that school district and it gives you the millage rate. And then that's the dollar per thousand that you pay. And the taxable value is usually anywhere between 40 to 50%. So there's like a little math thing that we could do too. So you could take the value of the house, divide it in half, multiply it by 40%, times it by the millage rate, and come up with a yearly tax too. So sometimes we'll just do that because it's easier and you don't have to call, but either way works.
Okay. Yeah, that's really good information. So I always discourage people from using the SEV on a home to determine the value. I always say an appraisal is going to get you the most truest form, and yet some people think they want to use SEV. Can you help guide people why they, or maybe you think they should, but what they should use?
The SEV is the state equalized value of the home. And it's the number that the assessor wants to tax your home at. So you have the taxable value and the SEV. So the taxable value of your home is what they are taxing it at. And the SEV is what they want to tax it at, but they can't because of that cap that we talked about earlier. A lot of people take that SEV and multiply it by 2, but sometimes it's only 40% of your value. And then there's like this, I don't know, cartoon or what have you that always says, when you think of your house, you think of it like a mansion, and the tax assessor thinks of it worth even more, but the seller thinks of it worth less, and the appraiser looks at it a whole different way. So everybody is valuing your home through different eyes.
Mhm.
So if you're going to sell your house, then I would call a realtor. What do you think you can sell my house for? If you're going to refinance, then I'd call an appraiser. What is the house going to appraise for? Because they could be 2 totally different. There was a time not so long ago that you were getting houses appraised, but they were selling $50,000, $60,000 over appraised value.
Right.
So in that instance, having an appraisal really didn't do you justice if you were going to put your house up for sale. But if you were going to refinance it, then you can only use the appraised value, or you can't use any more money. So I think depending on what you're trying to do, maybe look at it a couple different ways. But if the two people agree, then maybe that's the number that you use.
Yeah. Okay, which is always the goal.
Right.
But I do want people to inform that, depending on which is going to be your best advantage, is it the appraisal or is it looking at the SEV, depending on, what
Yeah,
your
SUV, I
is.
can't say most people ever do. It doesn't hold up in court. The appraisal is what holds up in court. If it's a divorce appraisal, not a mortgage appraisal, those don't hold up in court. And then usually you think about the time it takes to get divorced too, right? Could be 9 months plus or minus. So I have this one lady I was working with for a long time. She hired an appraiser to get a value of her house to do her divorce settlement. They got a value. Then months and months and months passed. Now it's time for her to refinance to pay off her spouse. And the appraisal came in $30,000 less than the first appraisal that she did, just because the market's different.
Yeah.
So, that market, that appraisal is literally one moment of time,
Mm.
not representative of a year or longer. So
So that's very
again,
important of how you have a strategy of when to get the appraisal, right? Yeah.
is the
Yeah.
market going up? Is the market going down?
Mhm.
Yeah, that's the hardest part, is because you usually, when you go through a divorce, you work at one section at a time, right?
Mhm.
But
Mhm.
then information changes.
Yeah. So what do you project? I know you don't have a crystal ball or anything, but what do you project the market's going to do? This is February 2024. What do you
Mm,
project the market this year is going to do? Any thoughts?
I think until we start getting a lot more new construction, we're going to see a really tough market, because there's nowhere for people to go, or we're going to have to see some interest rates level out a little bit. I mean, that they're not going back to twos and threes unless we have another terrible crisis, or people have to just get realistic about what a good interest rate is, um, before things happen. But from everything we've been told, the millennials, they're all, for the most part, they're making really great money. They're starting to get into their 30s. They're getting in that position where they're going to start purchasing. There's more millennials than there are baby boomers out there. So the housing market for the next 10 years, while the millennials are purchasing homes, it should be a very strong buyer's market. I just don't know if it's going to match up to the seller's market of selling. So I think we're going to be in a tough spot for the
Mhm.
next 10 years, while all these people need to find homes to live in, and the older generation are not moving out of their homes as quick as they did before.
Right, right.
I think a shortage is a real concern.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So I know in one of the, excuse me, in one of the sessions in my support groups, we talk about making the decisions. And one of the decisions we have to make is whether we keep the house. A lot of people have great emotional ties to the house for the children, for the stability. It's
Mm-hmm.
not always realistic if you look at the budget and you look at what is going to be out, what the bottom line is going to be through the divorce. How do you walk someone through that and understanding there is no way that you can really afford to stay in this house or to buy another home at the rate you want to buy it at?
Right. So I think it depends on where you're coming from and where you want to go, right? And where your income's coming from and for how long. There
Mhm.
are many people who come to me and say, my attorney said I can't afford the house and they want me to talk to you. And they can afford the house. Um, and I think it's in their best interest to keep the home because of that tax cap, for one thing. Maybe they've paid a lot of their mortgage down and they can do some equity buyout through assets as opposed to mortgaging more money. Maybe they can get a cosigner for a couple years. So sometimes it makes sense to stay in the house. It's the devil they know, right?
Yeah.
Not scary. You don't have to hire a mover. You don't have to make new friends. You don't have to wonder what's wrong with the house. And, typically you move into a new house, you have a couple $1,000s of things that need to be
Mhm.
done, right? And then there's other times where you have the really, really expensive house because it's in a specific school district that you want, but maybe you can move to the same size home, but save a lot more money or a lot more maintenance, depending on how much land that you have. And then maybe it makes sense to move. So, I'm a numbers girl, so I always want to run the numbers. What makes better sense? Staying, moving, and sometimes it's just the hassle of like, I just have too much to deal with right now. And the idea of putting a house up for sale and moving and getting the kids in a new school district is just more than people can take.
Yeah.
So it
Yeah.
depends. But if you're going to move soon, so now you have like, let's say you're going to keep the home, but in a year or two, you're going to move. Well, now you just took over all the real estate commission fees and all the transfer tax fees yourself because you wanted to keep the house for 1 or 2 more years. So we talk about that too. Like maybe you just need to bite the bullet because those expenses could be very expensive. And at least if you sell, then you're sharing them. So honestly, I think you can put me on either side of the fence and I could debate the point.
Yeah, I love that. So talk to us in our final few minutes of how you talk with people individually. You'll sit down with them, it won't cost them anything. They can just sit down and pick your brain and just get some ideas of where to begin this process.
Right. So typically people would email me. Um, and then I set up a 45-minute phone consultation with them. And I do not charge a retainer. I do not charge an hourly fee. So my job is a mortgage professional. I get paid for writing and closing mortgages from my employer. So the consultation and all that I do ahead of time and concentrating on divorce is because of my own background and my own experience and what I went through. And then I did extra education training and certification because I know how horrible it was to do all this. And I wanted to be helpful to people. And this is how I figured out how to be helpful in my current position of work.
Mhm.
So 45 minutes, I'm taking a bunch of information, I'm running credit, figuring out where income's coming from, figuring out what debt someone has, what, kind of budget is there, what are the mortgage guidelines pertaining to divorce,
Mhm.
what opportunities do we have from settlement, or maybe suggesting opportunities that nobody thought about. And then really I'm there kind of as a coach or a consultant while someone's working through with their attorney, that they can come back to me and say, okay, well, we're talking about me getting spousal support for this amount or me doing that. And then I can kind of plug and play. Well, this is how it affects your housing. This is now what you can do. This is now what you can't do.
Mhm.
And then maybe they go back and do more negotiation. And then we go back and forth a lot
Mhm.
until everybody is as happy as they can be. And I hope that they're happy enough with me that when they do purchase another home or they refinance their current home, that they'll let me write the mortgage for them. And then we'll do a lot of extra things that general mortgage people wouldn't do just because I am familiar with the divorce process. So if quitclaim needs to be done, if equity buyout letters need to be done, the new homestead affidavit, I have a whole list of post-divorce stuff that people should be working on. So I stay in touch even after the mortgage loan closes just to make sure like everyone gets back on their financial feet.
Yeah, what a wonderful service, Carrie, is that you
Feel
offer.
good.
It is just so, so important for these people who are just bewildered and don't know where to begin. Let me ask you one more question. So someone has decided, okay, I've I've made this decision. I haven't filed yet. I haven't even told my spouse that this is going to happen. And
Mhm.
we've tried the counseling and we're just in a desperate moment and you make this decision. Do you meet with people in
Sure.
that area as well?
Sure, because there's a lot of different types of ways to get divorced that a lot of people aren't
Mhm.
familiar with. So
Right.
talking about the collaborative process and the mediation process and hiring the traditional attorney and, just kind of working some stuff out on your own. Then there's the court appointed mediation and then there's the pre. So, just even discussing that at the beginning might be really educational to someone. And then obviously I work with a lot of, you know, different family law people, financial planners, attorneys, mediators like yourself.
Mm.
So maybe I could give referrals out to people that they would want to talk to.
Yeah, that's just such a wonderful service. And I know that I met you highly recommended from an attorney who said you've got to speak with Carrie
Hmm.
Goldring. So, and I'm so glad that I've gotten to know of your service. And
We've enjoyed each other's knowledge, that's for sure.
yes, yeah, for sure. Yeah, so this has been great and very informative as always.
Wonderful.
So to look up Carrie Goldring, it's not really hard if you notice her name. What a perfect name to have in the financial business, I must.
Yeah, it's easy. It's easy. A lot of people want to drop the R, but it is like it sounds, gold ring.
Yes, wonderful. So you're very easy to find. Just Google your name and you will find her. Reach out, have a conversation with her. Maybe um you have something in process, but you're not quite sure about it. I'm sure that Carrie would sit down with you and inform you on again your choices to help you have an informed situation.
Sure, love to. I
Make
could
it,
give my email address out if you don't
yeah,
mind.
that'd
Too.
be awesome.
It's C, which is my first initial, and then gold ring at, and there's three letters. U is an umbrella, H is in Harry, M is in mortgage.com.
Which stands for Union Home
Home mortgage, right?
Mortgage. Perfect. So yes, she's not hard to find. So reach out and have a conversation. And I'm sure you will gain a lot of knowledge and some helpful information to make these decisions. Carrie, thank you very
Thank
much.
you, Kathy. I so appreciate you.
Oh, I appreciate you. And with that, we'll call it good. This is Kathy Beatty with Divorce Support Anonymous, and I'm glad that you were with us today. And I know you learned something about the financial transitions that must take place as you go through a divorce. Thank you and have a good day. Oh, where do I stop my?
I think you got to go back to that more button.
Yeah.
They changed it.